In late 1941, Nazi Germany came closer to winning World War II than almost any other moment during the entire conflict. German soldiers stood just 20 miles or 32 kilometers from Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union and the political heart of the country. Some German officers later wrote that, through their binoculars, they could see the distant outline of the city and the defensive lines forming around it. If Moscow fell, the consequences could be catastrophic for the Soviet Union. The city was not only the capital, but also the center of Soviet communications, transportation, and government leadership. Railways connecting much of the country passed through Moscow, and losing the city could have crippled Soviet coordination of the war effort. German commanders believed victory was extremely close. Many of them thought the Soviet Union would collapse within weeks. But history would take a very different turn. The road to Moscow began months earlier with one of the most ambitious military operations ever attempted. On June 22, 1941, Adolf Hitler launched the invasion of the Soviet Union in a massive campaign known as Operation Barbarossa. It was the largest invasion in human history. Over 3 million German soldiers crossed the Soviet border supported by thousands of tanks, artillery pieces, and aircraft. The invasion stretched across an enormous front nearly 3,000 kilometers long. German forces advanced in 3 main directions, targeting Leningrad in the north, Ukraine in the south, and Moscow in the center. The speed and scale of the attack shocked the Soviet Union, which had not fully prepared for such a massive invasion despite many warning signs. In the first weeks of the invasion, German forces achieved extraordinary success. The German military used a strategy known as blitzkrieg, or lightning war, which relied on rapid armored advances supported by air power. German tanks smashed through Soviet defenses while aircraft destroyed communication lines and supply depots. Soviet units were often surrounded before they even realized the scale of the attack. Entire armies became trapped in massive encirclements. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers were captured in battles near Minsk, Smolensk, and Kiev. Within just a few months, millions of Soviet troops were either killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. German armies pushed deeper and deeper into Soviet territory, advancing hundreds of miles across the vast plains of Eastern Europe. At the time, many observers believed the Soviet Union might collapse before the end of 1941. Even some Western leaders feared that Germany would win the war in the East quickly. The German army appeared unstoppable. Its soldiers were experienced from earlier campaigns in Poland and Western Europe, and their equipment seemed superior to much of what the Soviet Union had available early in the war. As the German advance continued, the next major objective became clear. The German leadership believed that capturing Moscow would deal a decisive blow to the Soviet Union. By the autumn of 1941, the German High Command began planning a massive offensive aimed directly at the Soviet capital. The attack was called Operation Typhoon. The objective was to destroy Soviet forces defending the approaches to Moscow and capture the city before the harsh Russian winter arrived. German commanders believed that if they moved quickly enough, the Soviet Union would not be able to recover from the earlier defeats. In October 1941, the offensive began with enormous force. Once again, the German army achieved significant victories at the beginning of the operation. Massive Soviet forces were surrounded near the cities of Vyazma and Bryansk. These encirclements were some of the largest of the entire war. More than 600,000 Soviet soldiers were captured, and many more were killed or wounded. Entire Soviet armies disappeared from the battlefield almost overnight. With Soviet defenses shattered, German forces advanced rapidly toward Moscow. The capital now appeared dangerously exposed. Inside Moscow, the situation became increasingly tense. As news of the German advance spread, many citizens feared that the city might soon fall. Government officials began preparing evacuation plans in case the worst happened. Important factories were dismantled and transported eastward to the Ural Mountains and Siberia, where they could continue producing weapons far from the advancing German armies. Civilians were mobilized to help build defensive positions around the city. Thousands of people dug trenches, constructed barricades, and prepared anti-tank obstacles to slow the German advance. During this critical period, Joseph Stalin made an important decision. Many advisors suggested that he should evacuate the capital to ensure the continuity of Soviet leadership. However, Stalin chose to remain in Moscow. His decision helped maintain morale among both soldiers and civilians. Soviet propaganda encouraged people to defend the city at all costs. Despite the fear and uncertainty, many citizens continued working to strengthen the city's defenses. Meanwhile, German forces continued advancing toward the capital. By November 1941, they had reached positions incredibly close to Moscow. Some units were less than 30 kilometers from the city. German soldiers could see Soviet defensive lines forming around the outskirts of the capital. Many believed that victory was only days away. However, the German army was about to face an enemy it had underestimated, the Russian winter. As November turned into December, temperatures across the battlefield dropped dramatically. In some areas, the temperature fell to nearly minus 30 degrees Celsius. German troops were not prepared for such extreme cold. Many soldiers still wore autumn uniforms and lacked proper winter equipment. Vehicles struggled to start in the freezing conditions, and engines often froze overnight. Weapons jammed because lubricants thickened in the cold. Tanks and trucks became stuck in deep snow, making it difficult to move supplies to the front lines. The harsh weather began taking a heavy toll on the German army. Soldiers suffered frostbite and exhaustion. Supply lines became increasingly unreliable as vehicles broke down or were delayed by snow-covered roads. The German advance slowed dramatically just as they were approaching their ultimate objective. At the same time, the Soviet Union was preparing a counterstroke. Soviet intelligence had learned that Japan was unlikely to attack the Soviet Union from the east. This allowed Soviet commanders to transfer fresh troops from Siberia to defend Moscow. These soldiers were experienced in winter warfare and were equipped with warm clothing and winter camouflage. Many of them used skis to move quickly through the snow-covered forests and fields surrounding the capital. When these Siberian divisions arrived near Moscow, they strengthened Soviet defenses at a crucial moment. Unlike the exhausted German troops, these soldiers were well prepared for the harsh winter conditions. Their arrival helped give the Soviet army the strength it needed to launch a major counterattack. On December 5, 1941, the Soviet army began a large-scale counteroffensive along the front near Moscow. The Red Army attacked German positions across a wide area. German troops, already weakened by cold weather and supply problems, struggled to hold their lines. Gradually, the German army was forced to retreat. In some areas, they were pushed back more than 200 kilometers from the capital. The failure to capture Moscow marked one of the first major defeats for Germany during World War II. For months, the German army had appeared unstoppable. Now, that image was beginning to crack. The Soviet Union had survived its darkest moment, and the war in the East would continue for several more years. Looking back, historians often debate how close Germany truly came to victory during the Battle of Moscow. Some believe that capturing the city could have seriously weakened the Soviet Union's ability to continue fighting. Others argue that the vast size of the Soviet Union and its ability to relocate industry eastward meant that the war would likely have continued even if Moscow had fallen. What is certain, however, is that the battle marked a crucial turning point. The German army had come within just 20 miles of Moscow, yet they never captured the city. The Soviet counterattack pushed them back, and the dream of a quick German victory in the East disappeared. From that moment on, the war slowly began to turn against Nazi Germany. The struggle on the Eastern Front would continue for years, but the failure to take Moscow showed the world that Germany could be stopped.